One of the nicest features in After Effects CS4 was that it came bundled with Mocha for After Effects. Mocha is a great motion tracker from a company called Imaginary Systems. Well, After Effects CS5 comes bundled with Mocha version 2. However, I know a lot of you are jumping straight from CS3 to CS5, and frankly, it took me a while to get into Mocha. So before we dove in too far, first I thought I'd give you a quick tutorial on how to do a motion track with Mocha, then we'll discuss the new features like Mocha Shape. Mocha exists in the same folder as After Effects. Twirl open the folder and double-click Mocha for After Effects. And start. Now, it has a very different user interface than After Effects, but really it's not that hard to get used to after a while. I'm going to go up to File, New Project, choose my clip that I want to motion track. If it's an image sequence, just pick the first one in the sequence, click Open. Decide where I want to save my Mocha project file to. In this case, I want to go up a couple levels and save it in the same folder as my After Effects project. There we go. Be careful of the options. It does include, by default, the number of frames that was in your sequence, but the frame rate might default to something you don't like. For example, I know this particular sequence is at 23.976, not 10 frames a second. If you have interlaced material, you must separate fields now. You cannot separate fields after you've gotten past this new project screen. So if you're working with interlaced material, heads up. I'll click OK, and here is my footage inside Mocha. It starts with its own auto keyframe mode on. It's very useful in Mocha. I would go ahead and leave it on. As I drag through, I'm going to make the decision that I'd like to put some more graffiti on one of these walls. Perhaps this segment right here. And you'll notice immediately it doesn't have too many distinct features, but that's okay because Mocha is not looking for a specific point to track, it's looking at the entire surface, an entire plane that it can identify and track throughout a scene. Okay, if I'm going to track this wall, let's pick a frame where it's most visible, and it seems to be most visible, well, frankly, right here at the end. That's where I get to see most of that wall. So I'll start my tracking shape here. Mocha offers traditional Bezier splines, but also its own X-spline tool that I actually kind of like using for this sort of work. Now, I don't need to be very precise. I just need to loosely define this wall surface that I want to track. I'll go up here, and that should do it, and close off my mask. X-splines have tension on their corners, go down for a very rounded corner, or pull back for a very sharp corner. In this case, I can go ahead and pull back and get a fairly sharp edge, and you'll see Mocha will even zoom in for me to show me what that looks like. I'm going to turn off that zoom window for now because I don't need it. All right, now I have this wall surface, and part of my problem is during my track, which I haven't done yet, this man runs across that wall surface. If you know from traditional tracking, any obscuration like that will throw off your track. So before I track, I'm going to make an exclusion mask around him saying don't track this guy. I can go ahead and make that on the same layer as I define my surface to track, but a better workflow is to deselect and put this exclusion on its own layer. Again, I'll use X-splines. I'll just do something pretty rough around him just to help me mark where to exclude him while he's running. There, 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 and close off my mask. I'll drag my current time indicator back in time and see at what point does he really kind of go outside of the mask while he's in front of the wall. I'll go ahead and change my shape, and since I have auto keyframe mode on, it automatically places a keyframe for me. This is an auto keyframe mode that works. I like it. Now, I don't need to mask him too tightly, but I do want to have the maximum amount of that wall for Mocha to track. So I don't want to make the exclusion larger than I need to, but neither am I doing rotoscoping here. I don't need to be overly tight around him. All right, let's just make another rough keyframe back here earlier in time to maybe about right there. And I'm sorry that you're having to watch all this, because watching someone else mask is in the league of watching paint dry. But this will give you an idea of what you need to go through to make this work. Pull that down there, beyond the wall surface there, so I don't care about the back of him that much. I can get tighter on his head. By getting a little bit tighter on him, at least I am giving Mocha more information to not exclude and to in turn track. And Go back earlier. And he's outside of that wall. I don't need to worry about it. And I'm going to do just a little bit of touch up here in the middle. Just a couple extra keyframes to tighten things up. You can select multiple points and move them at the same time. You can right-click on a point, select all the points in the spline, and even get a moving tool to pick up and move the whole mask at once as well. I'll go back to my pick tool, which is akin to the After Effects selection tool, and tighten up a little bit more on him. Oh, there's his foot. Don't want to miss his foot. There we go. A little tighter on the knee and the hand here. Give Mocha more to track. Okay, that's basically all I need to make this track work. I'm going to go back to my starting frame. I want to track from here backwards to where I've originally defined this wall surface. I'm going to turn off tracking for my exclusion layer so that I'm tracking just my layer that's defined the wall surface, and say track backwards. And Mocha will go through and automatically track this footage. Rather than looking for individual points, it's trying to track the entire plane that's defined by my first mask outline. And you'll see that even as this guy goes in front of the layer, Mocha does a pretty good job of keeping this mask where it needs to be. And we come out on the other side intact. And we'll finish up the track with just a few more frames. And there we go. I'll turn off the visibility of my exclusion mask for now so it doesn't distract me. Drag through. And pretty good. Notice that that mask was initially down the center line of this dark stripe on the wall, and it stays there throughout. Now that I've tracked something inside Mocha and I have basic underlying tracking data, next I want to make a surface, a four-corner surface to corner pin my new information onto. So I'm going to turn on the surface, and I'm going to go ahead and drag these guys into position. Again, let's put my time marker at a good point here and say that I'm defining the corners of this wall as being up there, down here in this dark corner. And again, I'm going to use this dark streak down this concrete to kind of define the edge there. Come across there. If I'm not sure if I have my perspective right, Mocha's got another tool for that. Grid. And when I've got my grid turned on, I can see how well it tracks the supposedly flat surface of that wall. And I can increase my grid resolution. Now here's one funny thing about Mocha. Rather than having a typical scrubber, by default, you actually drag in a rotation like this to increase or decrease values. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but actually it's kind of handy. Okay, now that I've got my grid in place, I can more intelligently drag my surface to line up with what I think is a good parallax for this wall. And it's graffiti, it doesn't need to be perfect, but it gives me a good reference. So that's where I start, drag through time, and the grid really shows me how well things are tracking or not tracking during the course of this shot. That's holding up pretty well. If I wanted to really tweak out this track, there's this whole Adjust Track tab underneath here. And Imagineer does have a good tutorial online about how to do an Adjust Track. But for now, this is a good starting point. I'm just wanting to give you a quick lesson. Okay, I have my track, I have my surface, time to export. Export tracking data. Now I'm working with an early version of Mocha. You'll probably see different choices in these, but the one to go for is After Effects Corner Pin supports motion blur. This is one of the improvements they made in version 2, which is bundled with After Effects CS5. Rather than just providing four corners, they're now tracking the center of the surface, and that motion now is what can give motion blur inside After Effects. I'll select with motion blur, copy to my clipboard, save my project to be safe, and now let's toggle over to After Effects. I'm going to open up my Mocha starter, and here's my same footage again. Okay, I need something to put on that wall, and I've measured that it's in the whereabouts of 900 or so pixels tall, 300 to 400 wide, and I've actually created a pre-comp that includes my graffiti roughly in that shape. This is the pre-comp I want to slap on that wall. You can prepare artwork however you like. Go back to my tracking starter, drag in my wall addition, and now paste my Mocha data onto this new surface. Initially, it may not line up. Let's go ahead and move it later in time. That's because the footage layer that I tracked has different dimensions than the footage layer I'm corner pinning. Quite common. All you need to do is reveal the anchor point, A is the shortcut, and just scrub your guy, your graffiti, whatever you want to put on that wall, over into place. I'm going to put them up a little bit higher like that. Scoot them over a little bit. Maybe put them in a blend mode like overlay to blend them on that wall better. I'm going to press U to reveal my keyframes, and you'll see I have both corner pin data and also position, scale, and rotation. Again, Mocha is placing a plane, and with the export motion blur option, it's giving me position keyframes so that I can enable motion blur for this layer. And just very quickly, I'm going to switch to switches, turn on motion blur for this layer, and turn on motion blur for the overall composition. And you'll see that now my guy is blurred as we track through this scene. I'm going to press 0, cue up a quick RAM preview here. And that's not too bad of an initial track. I could have refined it further in Mocha, but this is just to give you a rough idea how to use the program. Now in this particular shot, since this guy is running in front of my new layer, I'm going to need to do some rotoscoping work to make him block out or exclude my new graffiti when he runs in front. And there's a number of ways of doing that. You can hand mask it, or if you watch the previous chapter, you can use the new roto brush to quickly create a matte based on this guy in his black suit and have him cut out your new layer behind. Just use it as a track matte. So that's the basics of how to track in Mocha. Now let's get on to what's new, Mocha shape, and some ways of handling motion blur.